Constitution does not tolerate such impediment. Okay, it's for the government's assurance to prosecute. Okay. As for the dissents, they strike a tone of chilling doom that is wholly disproportionate to what the court actually does today, conclude that immunity extends to official discussions between the president and his attorney general, and then remand to the lower courts to determine in the first instance whether and to what extent Trump's remaining alleged conduct is entitled to immunity. The principal dissent's starting premise, why is the majority allowed to respond to dissents? Can dissents then respond to the response, or like, is this the final one written, or... Silver lining. What is the silver lining? That ensures a ton of January 6 evidence is seen before the election. Okay, don't care. The principal dissent's starting premise that unlike speech and debate clause immunity, no constitutional text supports presidential immunity, is one that the court rejected decades ago as unpersuasive. And then they're citing to Fitzgerald again, which only speaks of civil immunity. See also Nixon, rejecting unanimously a similar argument in the analogous executive privilege context. A specific textual basis has not been considered a prerequisite to the recognition of immunity, nor is that premise correct. True, there is no presidential immunity clause in the Constitution, but there is no separation of powers clause either. Yet that doctrine is undoubtedly carved into the Constitution's text by its 3 articles, separating powers and vesting the executive power solely in the president. While that's true, how much conversation prior to the formation of the Constitution can you find about separation of powers? That's not a thing that was ever mysterious or like, oh, I wonder what the framers thought about the strict separation of powers in the U.S. government. Like, that's never been a question, right? Like, the idea that we could find as much, I know he's not necessarily arguing that, but the idea that you would find as much evidence for the separations of power, there's not a separations of powers clause, guys. So why can't there be like an infinite criminal immunity for, presidential core actions clause? Like, come on, Jesus, but whatever. I've long recognized the doctrine as mandating certain presidential privileges and immunities, even though the Constitution contains no explicit provision for immunity. Neither the dissents nor the government disavow any of those prior decisions. The principal dissent that then cites the impeachment judgment clause, arguing that it clearly contemplates that a former president may be subject to criminal prosecution. But that clause does not indicate whether a former president may, consistent with the separation of powers, be prosecuted for his official conduct in particular. It doesn't need to. Why would it? And the assortment of historical sources the principal dissent cites are unhelpful for the same reason. As the court has previously noted, relevant historical evidence on the question of presidential immunity is of a fragmentary character. True. Noting the poverty of really useful and unambiguous authority applicable to concrete problems of executive power. The most compelling arguments, therefore, arise from the Constitution's separations of powers and judiciary's historic understanding of that doctrine. The court's prior admonition is evident in the principal dissent's citations. Some of its cherry-picked sources do not even discuss the president in particular. And none of these sources discuss criminal prosecution. See, for example, post at 7 to 8, citing 2 debates, and none of them indicate whether he may be prosecuted for his official conduct. The principal dissent's most compelling piece of evidence consists of excerpted statements of Charles Pinckney from an 1800 Senate debate. But those statements reflect only the now discredited argument that any immunity not expressly mentioned in the Constitution must not exist. See, and Pinckney is not exactly a reliable authority on the separation of powers. He went on to state on the same day that it was wrong to give the nomination of judges to the president, an opinion expressly rejected by the framers. Given the framers' desire for an energetic and vigorous president, the principal dissent's view that the Constitution they designed allows all of his actions to be subject to prosecution, even the exercise of powers it grants exclusively to him, defies credulity. But the problem isn't that we're not talking about the exercising of powers it grants exclusively to the president. We're talking about doing criminal acts that aren't expressly empowered or that aren't expressly delegated to the president that he might do in lieu of his actual expressly delegated powers. I just feel like it's so silly. Like, Like, if I were to make a constitution that says I have the right to fuck your mom whenever I want, and you can never question that, and then I put a knife on my cock, and I fuck your mom in the throat, and then I fuck her in the stomach, and then I fuck her in the ass, and she's bleeding, dying on the ground, and you're like, bruh. And I go, sorry, I'm allowed to fuck your mom however I want. You actually have literally you fuck all that you can say, because I can fuck her any way that I want. You wrote that. Get bent, bitch. Right? It's just such a stupid, it's just such a weird way to, like, nobody here is talking about, like, contravening the things that were exclusively granted to the president. It's more like, how do we check for criminal actions that the president is committing? I don't know. Whatever. Unable to muster any meaningful textual or historical support. Same. Hello. Where's what? Unable to muster any meaningful textual or historical support, the principal dissent suggests that there is an established understanding that former presidents are answerable to the criminal law for their official acts. Conspicuously absent is mention of the fact that since the founding, no president has ever faced criminal charges, let alone for his conduct in office. This is also such a dog shit argument. Like, yeah, because presidents, maybe it's because they were. Do you know what would actually be a really good counter argument here for the majority opinion, or an argument for the majority opinion? Give us an example of presidents committing what we feel are criminal acts where they haven't been prosecuted for it. Because all of the arguments saying, oh, well, nobody's been charged with a criminal act, you could say that furthers, in one way, it furthers the idea that you can't criminally charge a president, but you could equally say that furthers the idea that it causes presidents to try not to commit criminal acts. Like, the argument works both ways for that. And accordingly, no court has ever been faced with the question of a president's immunity from prosecution. All that our nation's practice establishes on the subject is silence. Do you think in any of the opinions, the concurring or the majority, do they mention the fact that Nixon was pardoned? Or I guess they're just going to say, well, he was pardoned for unofficial acts, is what they would say, huh? Coming up short on reasoning, the dissents repeatedly level variations of the accusation that the court has rendered the president above the law. As before, that rhetorically chilling contention is wholly unjustified. Like everyone else, the president is subject to prosecution in his unofficial capacity. But unlike anyone else, the president is a branch of government, and the Constitution vests in him sweeping powers and duties. Accounting for that reality and ensuring that the president may exercise those powers forcefully, as the framers anticipated he would, does not place him above the law. It preserves the basic structure of the Constitution from which that law derives, which therefore places the president above the law here, but okay. The dissent's positions, in the end, boil down to ignoring the Constitution's separation of powers and the court's precedent, and instead fear-mongering on the basis of extreme hypotheticals about a future where the president feels empowered to violate federal criminal law. The dissents overlook the more likely prospect of an executive branch that cannibalizes itself, with each successive president free to prosecute his predecessors, yet unable to boldly and fearlessly carry out his duties for fear that he may be next. Well, hold on. Prior to this Supreme Court ruling, was not every single prior president free to prosecute his predecessors? Notice how that hasn't happened, though? Like, the argument is self-defeating. It hasn't happened, yet apparently up until this point in time, as the Supreme Court has explicitly said, now you can't do it. It didn't happen. So, like, what is the... For instance, Section 371, which has been charged in this case, is a broadly worded criminal statute that can cover any conspiracy for the purpose of impairing, obstructing, or defeating the lawful function of any department of government. U.S. v. Johnson. Virtually every president is criticized for insufficiently enforcing some aspect of federal law, such as drug, gun, immigration, or environmental law. And now the Supreme Court, in a bid to ensure their own legitimacy, decides to delegitimize federal law by saying, like, listen, who the fuck knows what any of these fucking laws mean anyway, bro? You can charge anybody for this shit, okay? Well, I don't know what the fuck any of this federal fucking law means. Like, bro, that's the argument you're gonna go with? Like, I don't know what the fuck this shit says. What? An enterprising prosecutor in a new administration may assert that a previous president violated that broad statute. Without immunity, such types of prosecutions of ex-presidents could quickly become routine. But again, this argument is self-defeating because one could argue, okay, well, fine, if you've got an adventurous enough prosecutor, could this prosecutor not say, oh, well, we're just going to go ahead and charge everything? And we're going to argue that actually, the presumptive immunity doesn't apply in any of these cases. We're going to make that argument for every single action that we didn't like. You can't really protect from this, right? You can't protect from a corrupt prosecutor in a legal system. You can safeguard a little bit against it, but not really. Without immunity, such types of prosecutions of ex-presidents could quickly become routine. The enfeebling of the presidency and our government would quickly result from such a cycle of factional strife is exactly what the framers intended to avoid. Ignoring those risks, the dissents are instead content to leave the preservation of our system of separated powers up to the good faith of prosecutors. Well, who do you trust more? The body of people that make up the prosecutorial system of the United States, or a single man called the President of the United States who might be uniquely motivated in his own interests, who also is running for re-election? Who is more at risk here for making selfish decisions that are contrary to the interests of the United States? Finally, the principal dissent finds it troubling that the court does not designate any course of conduct alleged in the indictment as private. Despite the unprecedented nature of this case, the significant constitutional questions that it raises, its expedited treatment in the lower courts and in this court, and the lack of factual analysis in the lower courts, and a lack of briefing on how to categorize the conduct alleged, the principal dissent would go ahead and declare all of it unofficial. The other dissent, meanwhile, analyzes the case under comprehensive models and paradigms of its own concoction and accuses the court of providing no meaningful guidance about how to apply the new paradigm or how to categorize a president's conduct. It would have us exhaustively define every application of presidential immunity. Our dissenting colleagues exude an impressive infallibility. While their confidence may be inspiring, the court adheres to time-tested practices instead, deciding what it required to dispose of this case and remanding after reversing on a threshold question to obtain guidance from the litigants, the court below. And he cites Sotomayor, concurring in judgment. Good one. These guys are snarky. This case poses a question of lasting significance. When may a former president be prosecuted for official acts taken during his presidency? Our nation has never before needed an answer. But in addressing that question today, unlike the political branches and the public at large, we cannot afford to fixate exclusively or even primarily on present exigencies. In a case like this one, focusing on transient results may have profound consequences for the separation of powers and for the future of our republic. Our perspective must be more far-sighted, for the peculiar circumstances of the moment may render a measure more or less wise, but cannot render it more or less constitutional. Our first president had such a perspective. In his farewell address, George Washington reminded the nation that a government of as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. A government of as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. Okay. A government too feeble to withstand the enterprises of faction, he warned, could lead to the frightful despotism of alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge. And the way to avoid that cycle, he explained, was to ensure that government powers remained properly distributed and adjusted. I wonder what this whole speech by George Washington says. Let's see. George Washington 226. 35 writings of George Washington. Fuck it, I'll just Google a quote. This article, Justice Roberts' drone strike on George Washington's legacy. Jesus, that's a nice one. He cited George Washington. Let's read what George Washington had to say in his farewell address to see how we would characterize that. Annotation. By 1796, Washington had pushed the British out the western fronts, opened the Ohio country to white settlement, and avoided war with Britain. In a farewell address published in a Philadelphia newspaper in 1796, Washington warned his countrymen against the growth of partisan divisions. He also called on the country to avoid permanent alliance with any portion of the foreign world. It would not be until after World War II that the country would establish peacetime alliances with foreign nations. Hold on, I want to read the whole thing. The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also now clear to you, or now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters much pains will be taken, many artifices employed, to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth. As this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously, directed, it is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourselves to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can in any event be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which link together the various parts. Sorry, just reading stuff. To the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government for the whole is indispensable. No alliances, however strict, between the parts can be an adequate substitute. They must inevitably experience the infractions and interruptions which all alliances in all times have experienced. Sensible of this momentous truth, you have improved upon your first essay by the adoption of a constitution of government better calculated than your former for an intimate union and for the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of our own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles, in the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy, and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, has a just claim to your confidence and your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitution of government. But the constitution, which at any time exists, till changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. All obstructions to the execution of the laws, all combinations and associations under whatever plausible character, with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities are destructive of their fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, and according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous projects of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interests. Jesus, these sentences. However, combinations or associations of the above descriptions may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to its acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however specious the pretexts. One method of assault may be to effect, in the form of the Constitution, alterations which will impair the energy of the system, and thus to undermine what cannot be directly overthrown. In all the changes to which you may be invited, remember that time and habit are at least as necessary to fix the true character of government as of other human institutions, that experience is the surest standard by which to test the real tendency of the existing constitution of a country, that facility in changes upon the credit of mere hypotheses and opinion exposes to perpetual change from the endless variety of hypotheses and opinion, and remember especially that for the efficient management of your common interests in a country so extensive as ours, a government of as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. Liberty itself will find in such a government, with powers properly distributed and adjusted, its surest guardian. It is indeed little else than a name where the government is too feeble to withstand the enterprises of faction, to confine each member of the society within the limits prescribed by the laws, and to maintain all in the secure and tranquil enjoyment of the rights of person and property. So I guess the liberal argument is, what is George Washington talking about? The enterprising factions that would seek to destroy the government would be a corrupt president immune from criminal prosecution, and I guess the Roberts and I guess all the majority opinion writers in the court would say actually the enterprising factions would be the judicial branch that would endlessly try to litigate or I guess criminally prosecute prior presidents. I guess it doesn't really cut one way or another. It's just a general principle for not having your government get fucked. Yeah, Washington is kind of arguing against political parties here too, but I guess like in the original U.S., I don't think we envisioned having political parties, huh? I don't think so. Maybe, damn, did Washington fucking hate parties? Maybe he did. Without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought not to be entirely out of sight, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it in the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. It serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. He's talking about political parties here, I believe, right? The political parties, they agitate the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption, which find a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions. Thus, the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. There is an opinion that parties in free countries are useful checks upon the administration of the government and serve to keep alive the spirit of liberty. This, within certain limits, is probably true, and in governments of a monarchical caste patriotism may look with indulgence, if not with favor, upon the spirit of party, but in those of the particular character, in governments purely elective, it is a spirit not to be encouraged. From their natural tendency, it is certain there will always be enough of that spirit for every salutary purpose. And there being constant danger of excess, the effort ought to be, by force of public opinion, to mitigate and assuage it. A fire not to be quenched, it demands a uniform vigilance to prevent its bursting into a flame, lest instead of warming, it should consume. Okay. He doesn't like foreign allies either. What an interesting speech to cite. Do you think Supreme Court justices just read certain speeches that they have them in mind and like, God, I can't wait to pull this fucking quote out. Or maybe in common law classes or whatever, maybe they teach, or maybe in some kind of legal classes, maybe they teach certain speeches and like every law student at a certain school has heard this or whatever. I don't know. Who was your favorite founding father? I don't know, either Barack Obama or Ron Paul. In his farewell address, George Washington reminded the nation that a government of as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. A government too feeble to withstand the enterprises of faction, he warned, could lead to the frightful despotism of ultimate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge. And the way to avoid that cycle, he explained, was to ensure that government powers remain properly distributed and adjusted. Well, it sounds like what he was saying is we should just not have parties at all, but okay. But whatever. Okay. Versus, I don't feel like that was like the most relevant speech to link, but whatever. Okay. It is these enduring principles, I guess the general point maybe is kind of these enduring principles that guide our decision in this case. The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution. Then why would you give absolute immunity just based on the relationship that the president has with somebody that he speaks with? I think that this entire yap here, I think that all of this could work except for the fact that there is absolute immunity granted for some classes of presidential action, which, if all of this was just presumptive immunity, I could maybe get behind. I could understand at least all of this. Maybe I wouldn't say I don't know if I'd agree with it, but I could at least understand the rationale here. Congress may not criminalize. The president, therefore, may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he's entitled, at a minimum, to a presumptive immunity from prosecution for all of his official acts. Like, that's an okay-ish statement, maybe. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. The judgment of the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit is vacated, and the case is remanded for further proceedings. Consistent with this opinion, it is so ordered. This was written by Chief Justice Roberts, right? Now we are going to read the first concurring opinion by Judge Thomas. Wait, what does the J mean? Hold on, is this a middle initial or does it just mean judge? Is the J for judge? Oh, justice. Jesus. As an Australian lawyer, the way these U.S. Supreme Court justices write is so painstaking. Really? I think the writing is nice. I think it's cool. Supreme Court of the United States. Clarence Thomas. Okay, Justice Clarence Thomas. We should look at pictures of these justices just so we have them in mind. This was Roberts. Know his face. Wait. Hold on, I can't tell this is I thought this was a... I thought this was Assad. That was him 20 years ago. I don't care. Here's Thomas. Boom. There you go. Few things would threaten our constitutional order more. Sorry. Few things would threaten our constitutional order more than criminally prosecuting a former president for his official acts. I was going to say few things would threaten our constitutional order more than a president immune from criminal prosecution, but whatever. Fortunately, the Constitution does not permit us to chart such a dangerous course. As the court forcefully explains, the framers deemed an energetic executive essential to the security of liberty, and our system of separated powers accordingly insulates the president from prosecution for his official acts. What is all the... Hold on, I just need to see this. Where does this come from? Deemed an energetic executive. Is this really in regards to immunity, or is this just in regards to like all the powers afforded to the president? What is this quote originally from? What is this? 2020. Oh, Federalist number 70. Wait, did we read that one, or did we read 77? To the people of the state of New York. Hold on. Okay. Bro, you're a sentence in. He's just stating general background truths that are needed for context. Holy fuck omega lol. No, shut the fuck up, you illiterate fucking monkey. Unless you're black, in which case you fucking... No, I'm just kidding. Newbie. This quote is brought up over and over and over and over again. When you use these older quotes, you're doing it because you're lending, you're essentially borrowing on or trading on the reputation of the person that you're quoting. So no, if they're going to quote over and over and over and over again this particular thing, then I want to know what the context of this quote is. What were the framers talking about? Like, if I were to say, for instance, that if I were to say, and I quote the great whatever, that a hard man is needed to do the right job. And I say this in regards to having to elect a president or whatever to conduct war or whatever. And we find that the source of this quote was like some dude that was just talking about, being able to fuck 3 women at a gangbang. It's like, yeah, you got to be a hard man in order to do the job. Like, that would be like, why the fuck are you quoting this guy? This is not at all what the fuck he's talking about. Why are we relying on this dude who's talking about dicks to talk about the hardness of man, right? So no, fuck you. Now just for you, now we're going to read this. Fuck you. We're going to read the whole fucking thing. Get fucked. To the people of the state of New York, there is an idea. The Federalist Papers were basically just debating. The framers used cringy pseudonyms to debate people into accepting the federal government. They literally debated the USA into existence, okay? As we talk about how worthless, people like Hassan talk about how worthless debate is, because to him, debate was just basically killing whichever person wasn't as left as you wanted them to be when you were forming your countries. In the US, we did real debate, okay? They debated the whole government, okay, out of nothing into existence. Which is based. There is an idea, which is not without its advocates, that a vigorous executive is inconsistent with the genius of Republican government. Real quick. A republic in which political power rests with the public through their representatives in contrast to a monarchy. Okay. Republic just means that your officials are elected, not they don't come from God or from some authoritarian bullshit. Okay. Republic. Okay. Okay. Where are we at? Okay. There is an idea, which is not without its advocates, that a vigorous executive is inconsistent with the genius of Republican government. The enlightened well-wishers to this species of government must at least hope that the supposition is destitute of foundation, since they can never admit its truth, without at the same time admitting the condemnation of their own principles. Energy in the executive is a leading character in the definition of good government. It is essential to the protection of the community against foreign attacks. It is not less essential to the steady administration of the laws, to the protection of property against those irregular and high-handed combinations which sometimes interrupt the ordinary course of justice, to the security of liberty against the enterprises and assaults of ambition, of faction, and of anarchy. Every man, the least conversant in Roman story knows how often that republic was obliged to take refuge in the absolute power of a single man under the formidable title of dictator, as well against the intrigues of ambitious individuals who aspired to the tyranny and the seditions of whole classes of the community whose conduct threatened the existence of all government, as against the invasions of external enemies who menaced the conquest and destruction of Rome. In my country, every politician has immunity, and the only way to go to court is if more than 50% of members of parliament vote for it. Cool. There can be no need, however, to multiply arguments or examples on this head. A feeble executive implies a feeble execution of the government. A feeble executive is but another phrase for a bad execution, and a government ill executed, whatever it may be in theory, must be in practice a bad government. Taking it for granted, therefore, that all men of sense will agree in the necessity of an energetic executive, it will only remain to inquire what are the ingredients which constitute this energy. How far can they be combined with those other ingredients which constitute safety in the Republican sense? And how far does this combination characterize the plan which has been reported by the convention? The ingredients which constitute energy in the executive are unlimited criminal immunity from all judicial review. The energy is complete and total immunity from all forms of criminal prosecution. Base. Well, there we go. We're done. Certainly that's going to come up here. The ingredients which constitute energy in the executive are, first, unity. Secondly, duration. Thirdly, an adequate provision for its support. Fourthly, competent powers. For quoting this, you would probably look here in the adequate provision for its support to argue that, this is why they thought in a vigorous executive or whatever, right? Or should be immune from these types of criminal review or judicial review. The ingredients which constitute safety in the Republican sense are, first, a due dependence on the people, secondly, a due responsibility. Those politicians and statesmen who have been the most celebrated for the soundness of their principles and for the justice of their views have declared in favor of a single executive and a numerous legislature. They have, with great propriety, considered energy as the most necessary qualification of the former, and have regarded this as most applicable to power in a single hand, while they have, with equal propriety, considered the latter as best adapted to deliberation and wisdom, and best calculated to conciliate the confidence of the people and to secure their privileges and interests. That unity is conducive to energy will not be disputed. Decision, activity, secrecy, and dispatch will generally characterize the proceedings of one man in a much more eminent degree than the proceedings of any greater number, and in proportion as the number is increased, these qualities will be diminished. They want decision, action, secrecy, and dispatch. The unity may be destroyed in two ways, either by vesting the power in two or more magistrates of equal dignity and authority, or by vesting it ostensibly in one man, subject, in whole or in part, to the control and cooperation of others in the capacity of counselors to him. Of the first, the two consuls of Rome may serve as an example. Of the last, we shall find examples in the constitution of several of the states, New York and New Jersey. If I recollect right, are the only states which have entrusted the executive authority wholly to single men. Both these methods of destroying the unity of the executive have their partisans, but the votaries of an executive council are the most numerous. They are both liable, if not equal, to similar objections and may in most lights be examined in conjunction. The experience of other nations will afford. So basically, what we're saying so far is like, we need one president dude who can make decisions. As soon as you bog this down with 2, 3, 4, 5 people, we need somebody decisive who can act in the execution of what Congress says. It's one thing for a body of people to deliberate. Well, what should the law be? Well, how should we blah, 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 right? Legislators can do that. But when it comes time to enforce the law, there should be one man who says, okay, the legislators have given me this, then this indeed is how we shall enforce it. Now one thing I'm really curious about, reading this Federalist paper, and I guess maybe considering the strength of the executive that's kind of been laid out in an unrelated way here in this decision, in the Supreme Court decision, how do they justify overturning Chevron, saying, well, actually, we said the executive was in some ways really strong, but actually needs to be incredibly limited by congressional legislation here. I wonder, wait, where are we? I don't know why chat keeps freezing. I'm too lazy to refresh a second. Here, you have cake now. You have cake for now. I'll bring it back tomorrow. The experience of other nations will afford little instruction on this head. As far, however, as it teaches anything, it teaches us not to be enamored of plurality in the executive. We have seen that the Archaeans, on an experiment of 2 praetors, were induced to abolish one. The Roman history records records many instances of mischiefs to the Republic from the dissensions between the consuls and between the military tribunes, who were at times substituted for the consuls. But it gives us no specimens of any particular advantages derived to the state from the circumstance of the plurality of those magistrates. That the dissensions between them were not more frequent or more fatal is a matter of astonishment, until we advert to the singular position in which the Republic was almost continually placed, and to the prudent policy pointed out by the circumstances of the state and pursued by the consuls of making a division of the government between them. The patricians engaged in a perpetual struggle with the plebeians for the preservation of their ancient authorities and dignities. The consuls, who were generally chosen out of the former body, were commonly united by the personal interest they had in the defense of the privileges of their order. In addition to this motive of union, after the arms of the Republic had considerably expanded the bounds of its empire, it became an established custom with the consuls to divide the administration between themselves by lot, one of them remaining at Rome to govern the city and its environs, and the other taking the command in the more distant provinces. This expedient must, no doubt, have had great influence in preventing those collisions and rivalships which might otherwise have embroiled the peace of the Republic. So this is an example where, like, okay, fine, sometimes the executive is split, but even when the executive is split, all they do is they just go be singular executives after dividing it into different administrative states, essentially. By quitting the dim light of historical research, attaching ourselves purely to the dictates of reason and good say, I don't know what the fuck that means. Oh, good sense, I think is typoed. We shall discover much greater cause to reject than to approve the idea of plurality in the executive under any modification whatever. Wherever 2 or more persons are engaged in any common enterprise or pursuit, there is always danger of difference of opinion. If it be a public trust or office in which they are clothed with equal dignity and authority, there is peculiar danger of personal emulation and even animosity. From either, and especially from all these causes, the most bitter dissensions are apt to spring. Whenever these happen, they lessen the respectability, weaken the authority, and distract the plans and operation of those whom they divide. If they should unfortunately assail the supreme executive magistracy of a country consisting of a plurality of persons, they might impede or frustrate the most important measures of the government in the most critical emergencies of the state. And what is still worse, they might split the community into the most violent and irreconcilable factions, adhering differently to the different individuals who composed the magistracy. Jesus. Men often oppose a thing merely because they have had no agency in planning it, or because it may have been planned by those whom they dislike. But if they have been consulted and have happened to disapprove, opposition then becomes, in their estimation, an indispensable duty of self-love. They seem to think themselves bound in honor, and by all the motives of personal infallibility, to defeat the success of what has been resolved upon contrary to their sentiments. Men of upright, benevolent tempers have too many opportunities of remarking with horror to what desperate lengths this disposition is sometimes carried, and how often the great interests of society are sacrificed to the vanity, to the conceit, and to the obstinacy of individuals who have credit enough to make their passions and their caprices interesting to mankind. Perhaps the question now before the public may, and its consequences, afford melancholy proofs of the effects of this despicable frailty, or rather detestable vice, in the human character. Okay. Wait, what are we doing here? Why is this guy? Oh. Can we get a retard translation? I don't know why. And often was me say no interesting. I think this is arguing, or this is just showing the frailty of a single person making decisions. Just basically saying how a good politician can fuck everybody over on their own personal gain or whatever. But okay, it's not nothing to. Upon the principles of a free government, inconveniences from the source just mentioned must necessarily be submitted to in the formation of the legislature, but it is unnecessary and therefore unwise to introduce them into the constitution of the executive. It is here, too, that they may be more pernicious. Okay, it is here, too, that they may be more pernicious. In the legislature, promptitude of decision is oftener an evil than a benefit. The differences of opinion and the jarrings of parties in that department of the government, though they may sometimes obstruct salutary plans, yet often promote deliberation and circumspection, and serve to check excesses in the majority. That's just saying here that, like, okay, well, in the legislature, you don't want decisive action. You do want them deliberating a lot. If the legislature is moving too quickly, there might be really bad things happening. When a resolution, too, is once taken, the opposition must be at an end. That resolution is a law, and resistance to it is punishable, but no favorable circumstances palliate or atone for the disadvantages of dissension in the executive department. Here they are pure and unmixed. There is no point at which they cease to operate. They serve to embarrass and weaken the execution of the plan or measure to which they relate, from the first step to the final conclusion of it. They constantly counteract those qualities in the executive which are the most necessary ingredients in its composition, vigor, and expedition, and this without any counterbalancing good. In the conduct of war, in which the energy of the executive is the bulwark of our national security, everything would be to be apprehended from its plurality. So they're basically saying that, like, well, look, when people debate in the legislature, that's good. You want people to pass legislation, but there should be people that are arguing on the other end. It's really good to have people debating and making laws. In fact, if there was no debate, if the legislature was just shitting out laws, that would be really, really, really bad. But once a law is passed and you have the law done, for the execution of the law, there is no virtue in its debate. Like, once you've got the law passed, you need one man to execute on the law. Nothing good comes from two people who are having a huge disagreement over the application of said law. You just need one man to implement it. Yeah, that's essentially what they're saying here. I love the fact that this is how we are going to lose democracy, with people like you supporting a corpse against a wannabe dictator. Okay. I hope I see you at the other end of the Civil War, my friend. It must be confessed that these observations apply with principal weight to the first case supposed, that is, to a plurality of magistrates. When they say magistrates, they just mean like president, basically, a person administering the execution of the law. Or executing the law, I should say, to a plurality of magistrates of equal dignity and authority, a scheme, the advocates for which are not likely to form a numerous sect, but they apply, though not with equal, yet with considerable weight to the project of a council whose concurrence is made constitutionally necessary to the operations of the ostensible executive. An artful cabal in that council would be able to distract and to enervate the whole system of administration. If no such cabal should exist, the mere diversity of views and opinions would alone be sufficient to tincture the exercise of the executive authority with a spirit of habitual feebleness and dilatoriness. Basically just we can't have a divided executive. But one of the weightful objections to a plurality in the executive, and which lies as much against the last as the first plan, is that it tends to conceal faults and destroy responsibility. Responsibility is of two kinds, to censure and to punishment. The first is the more important of the two, especially in an elective office. Man, in public trust, will much oftener act in such a manner as to render him unworthy of being any longer trusted than in such a manner as to make him obnoxious to legal punishment. But the multiplication of the executive adds to the difficulty of detection in either case. It often becomes impossible, amidst mutual accusations, to determine on whom to blame or the punishment of a pernicious measure or series of pernicious measures ought really to fall. It is shifted from one to another with so much dexterity and under such plausible appearances that the public opinion is left in suspense about the real author. The circumstances which may have led to any national miscarriage or misfortune are sometimes so complicated that, where there are a number of actors who may have had different degrees and kinds of agency, though we may clearly see upon the whole that there has been mismanagement, yet it may be impractical to pronounce to whose account the evil which may have been incurred is truly chargeable. This is basically saying that, like, if you were to try to consider if a president is making a mistake due to, what did it say? Basically, are you doing something that's bad publicly, or are you doing like a criminal act, essentially? It can be hard to differentiate between those two things. Quote, I was so overruled by my counsel, the counsel were so divided in their opinions that it was impossible to obtain any better resolution on the point, end quote. These and similar pretexts are constantly at hand, whether true or false. And who is there that will either take the trouble or incur the odium of a strict scrutiny into the secret springs of the transaction? Should there be found a citizen zealous enough to undertake the unpromising task, if there happens to be a collusion between the parties concerned, how easy it is to clothe the circumstances with so much ambiguity as to render it uncertain what was the precise conduct of any of those parties. Ooh, I wonder if this is quoted in any of the in any of this, because I feel like this whole paragraph here speaks way better to the hazards of criminal prosecution. And the single instance in which the governor of this state is coupled with a council that is, in the appointment to offices, we have seen the mischiefs of it in the view now under consideration. Scandalous appointments to important offices have been made. Some cases, indeed, have been so flagrant that all parties have agreed in the impropriety of the thing. When inquiry has been made, the blame has been laid by the governor on the members of the council, who, on their part, have charged it upon his nomination, while the people remain altogether at a loss to determine by whose influence their interests have been committed to hands so unqualified and so manifestly improper. In tenderness to individuals, I forbear to descend the particulars. Out of respect for those accused, I won't say shit. This is what he's saying here. This is like a tongue-in-cheek or cheeky. It is evident from these considerations that the plurality of the executive tends to deprive the people of the two greatest securities they can have for the faithful exercise of any delegated power. First, the restraints of public opinion, which lose their efficacy, as well on account of the division of the censure attendant on bad measures among a number, as on account of the uncertainty on whom it ought to fall. And secondly, the opportunity of discovering which facility and clearness the misconduct of the persons they trust, in order either to their removal from office or to the actual punishment cases which admit of it. In England, the king is a perpetual magistrate, and it is a maxim which is obtained for the sake of the public peace, that he is unaccountable for its administration, and his person sacred. Nothing, therefore, can be wiser in that kingdom than to annex to the king a constitutional council who may be responsible to the nation for the advice they give. Without this, there would be no responsibility whatever in the executive department, an idea inadmissible in a free government. But even there, the king is not bound by the resolutions of his council, though they are answerable for the advice they give. He is the absolute master of his own conduct in the exercise of his office and may observe or disregard the counsel given to him at his sole discretion. But in a republic, where every magistrate ought to be personally responsible for his behavior in office, the reason which in the British Constitution dictates the propriety of a council not only ceases to apply, but turns against the institution. In the monarchy of Great Britain, it furnishes a substitute for the prohibited responsibility of the chief magistrate, which serves in some degree as a hostage to the national justice for his good behavior. In the American Republic, it would serve to destroy or would greatly diminish the intended and necessary responsibility of the chief magistrate himself. The idea of a council to the executive, which has so generally obtained in the state constitutions, has been derived from the maxim of Republican jealousy, which considers power as safer in the hands of a number of men than of a single man. If the maxim should be admitted to be applicable in this to the case, I should contend that the advantage on that side would not counterbalance the numerous disadvantages on the opposite side, but I do not think the rule at all applicable to the executive power. I clearly concur in opinion, in this particular, with a writer whom the celebrated Junius, I don't know what the fuck this word to, pronounces to be deep, solid, and ingenious, that the executive power is more easily confined when it is one, that it is far more safe should be a single object for the jealousy and watchfulness of the people, and in a word, that all multiplication of the executive is rather dangerous than friendly to liberty. A little consideration will satisfy us that the species of security sought for the multiplications of the executive is unattainable, it becomes more liable to be more dangerous when abused, and in the hands. Yeah, okay. I wonder. I wonder if any of the Federalist Papers wrote about criminally prosecuting a head of state. But I feel like this is mainly just addressing like how the executive should act. This Federalist paper is basically meant to be giving the president enough power and flexibility to act decisively in crises and handle the responsibility of the office effectively, right? Yeah, and it's arguing over the balancing of a single person versus a council of people, basically. But okay. Whew. We're on 53 of 119. Jesus. Any thoughts on how it's cited now that you've read it? I think it's cited actually pretty well. I'll reread Justice Thomas's opening paragraph. Few things would threaten our constitutional order more than criminally prosecuting a former president for his official acts. Fortunately, the Constitution does not permit us to chart such a dangerous course. As the court forcefully explains, the framers had deemed an energetic executive essential to the security of liberty, and our system of separated powers accordingly insulates the president from prosecution for his official acts. Do I? That paper was essentially talking about how you can't divide up power in the executive because they would constantly be fighting over themselves and it would undermine the executive. But would a challenge from another branch of government be the same thing? I don't know. I'll give it a 50-50, actually. I'm not sure. I'll give it a 50-50 on it. To conclude otherwise would hamstring the vigorous executive that our Constitution envisions. While the separation of powers may prevent us from righting every wrong, it does so in order to ensure that we do not lose liberty. I write separately to highlight another way in which this prosecution may violate our constitutional structure. In this case, the Attorney General purported to appoint a private citizen as special counsel to prosecute a former president on behalf of the United States. But I am not sure that any office for the special counsel has been established by law as the Constitution requires. By requiring that Congress create federal offices by law, the Constitution imposes an important check against the president. He cannot create offices at his pleasure. If there is no law establishing the office the special counsel occupies, then he cannot proceed with this prosecution. A private citizen cannot criminally prosecute anyone, let alone a former president. Oh, nice. He's just going to challenge. This is written in concurrent. Concurrent? Is that a word? It's a concurring opinion. This doesn't count for anything, right? Like, this wouldn't go. This wouldn't actually, do anything, would it? Oh my god, I did not mean to do that. Oh, thank god. Back to page. Okay. Federalist paper number 69. Do you think it's a valid concern to say that this decision can end democracy? I think that democracy in the United States is robust enough that no single act can end it. But it seems to be going in a direction of giving an undue amount of power to the executive that I don't think there's good justification for. We must conclude that a duration of 4 years for the Chief Magistrate of the Union is a degree of permanency far less to be dreaded in that office than a duration of 3 years for a corresponding office in a single state. Let's conclude the duration. Oh, sorry. Okay, this had to do with something else. I shouldn't have started there. Sorry. The president of the United States would be liable to be impeached, tried, and upon conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors, removed from office, and would afterwards be liable to prosecution and punishment in the ordinary course of law. The person of the King of Great Britain is sacred and inviolable. There is no constitutional tribunal to which he is amenable, no punishment to which he can be subjected without involving the crisis of a national revolution. In this delicate and important circumstance of personal responsibility, the President of Confederated America would stand upon no better ground than a governor of New York, and upon worse ground than the governors of Maryland and Delaware. At the time, I think these all had different things, restrictions placed upon them. The President of the United States is of power to return a bill, which shall pass the two branches of the legislature for reconsideration. The bill shall return as law. Anything else about? Secondly, the president is to be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. Do you ever notice how none of these guys in the 1700s, none of them ever fucking refer to our Air Force? Do you think that there was like an intentional reason for that? Or do you think they intended for like the Air Force to be controlled by like a second type of leader? Or... Damn, wait, these papers are so cool. Look, they have like they expand on and they use the original language of the Constitution and everything to give you directly all of their intentions. Man, these guys are yappers. President is to have the power with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. The King of Great Britain is the sole and absolute representative of the nation in all foreign transactions. He can of his own accord. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. I don't think I don't know if they mention anything else about criminal liability or anything. Okay. Whew, okay. Cute. No former president has faced criminal prosecution for his acts while in office in the more than 200 years since the founding of our country. And that is so despite numerous past presidents taking actions that many would argue constitute crimes. That is an unacceptable statement by a Supreme Court justice penning an opinion that is going to be published by the Supreme Court. You need to give examples that many would say. That's a Fox News quote. I think you should provide examples there. For as much as I may disagree with him, Roberts gave plenty of examples, and basically every single thing that he talked about. That's a pretty big statement. I think examples should be given, even if they're from dead presidents or something, so you don't like step on anybody's toes politically. I feel like you should give examples for this, but if this unprecedented prosecution is to proceed, it must be conducted by someone duly authorized to do so by the American people. The lower courts should thus answer these essential questions concerning the special counsel's appointment before proceeding. The Constitution sets forth how an office may be created and how it may be filled. The Appointments Clause provides the president shall nominate and bind with the advice. Well, I don't care about this. The constitutional process for filling an office is plain from this text. The default manner by appointing officers of the United States is a nomination by the president and confirmation by the Senate. But the clause provides a limited exception for the appointment of inferior officers. Congress may, by law, authorize one of three specified actors to appoint inferior officers without the advice and consent of the Senate. As relevant here, a head of department, such as the Attorney General, is one such actor that Congress may authorize by law to appoint inferior officers without senatorial confirmation. What does the special counsel exist as a part of? Was that attached to the DOJ? Or like, what is the special counsel? Is a permanent, independent federal investigative and prosecutorial agency. Its basic legislative authority comes from 4 federal statutes. The Civil Rights Reform Act, the Whistleblowers Protection Act, the Hatch Act, and the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Acts. Formed in 1979. Damn. And Thomas is saying that this should be abolished because there was no... Wait, or is the office of special counsel different than the appointment of special counsel? Wait, where's Pisco? Fuck. This is something different. This isn't the same thing. Like when you say that like Mueller was appointed or whatever, it's like a special counsel or whatever. This is not the same thing as the United States Office of Special Counsel. This is a different thing, right? Is a lawyer appointed to investigate and prosecute a particular case for wrongdoing for which a company or exists for the usual prosecuting authority? Okay. The limitation on the president's power to create offices grew out of the founders' experience with the English monarchy. The king could wield significant power by both creating and filling offices as he saw fit. He was emphatically and truly styled the fountain of honor. He not only appointed to all offices, but could create offices. The Federalist number 69. Oh, we just read that one, I think. As the king creates new titles, so may he create new offices. That ability to create offices raised many concerns about the king's ability to amass too much power. The king could both create a multitude of offices and then fill them with his supporters. In fact, one of the grievances raised by the American colonists in declaring their independence was that the king had erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Declaration of Independence. From the Declaration of Independence. The founders thus drafted the Constitution with evidently a great inferiority in the power of the president, in this particular, to that of the British king. The Federalist number 69, blah, blah, blah. The founders broke from the monarchical model by giving the president the power to fill offices with the Senate's approval, but not the power to create offices. They did so by imposing the constitutional requirement that new officer positions be established by law rather than through a king-like custom of the head magistrate unilaterally creating new offices. The Constitution thus gives Congress broad authority to establish and organize the executive branch. By keeping the ability to create offices out of the president's hands, the founders ensured that no president could unilaterally create an army of officer positions to then fill with his supporters. Instead, our Constitution leaves it in the hands of the people's elected representatives to determine whether new executive offices should exist. Where does the special counsel or the special investigators, where do these people come from? Like, how are they created, I guess? The United States, a special counsel or special prosecutor is a lawyer appointed to investigate. Appointed by who? The president? The DOJ? Might be handled by a special prosecutor rather than by an ordinary prosecutor, otherwise be in the position of investigating his or her own superiors. Special prosecutors have also handled investigations into those connected to the government but not in position, direct authority, just cabinet secretaries or elected campaign. Well, the most prominent special prosecutors have been those appointed since the 1870s to investigate presidents and those connected with them. The term can also be used for anyone. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Do you think Truman would have nuked Japan if he feared he could be held criminally responsible for the deaths of so many innocents? Yep. What's up? Quick, because I have to leave pretty soon. I want to finish reading this part.
You called for me?
What?
Do you mean you called for me?
Oh no, I'm good.
I don't give a shit.
Oh, wait, we can talk more about it tomorrow if you want.
No, you asked for me. People added me.
Oh, I think they were trolling you.
Oh.
Damn. Wait, Jesus. You did earlier. Wait, did I earlier? Did I ask him for what? You said, where's peace go? Oh, I just said that like rhetorically. I didn't. Fuck you guys. Okay, I'm good on this. Okay. Okay. Long-standing practice from the founding to today comports with this original understanding that Congress must create offices by law. The first Congress, for instance, routinely and explicitly created offices by statute. What the fuck does any of this have to do with the ruling that's given today? Is he? Did he just get bored? And he was like, "Bro, bruh, I got this shit I want to talk about, and I don't know where the fuck to do it." And Roberts was like, "I don't know, bro. Just attach it to like the fucking opinion here. Why not? What's even your problem?" He's like, "I don't know. I just fucking hate special counsel. I don't think the president can do that shit." And then Roberts was like, "All right, fuck it. We'll throw it in with the the Trump immunity shit, I guess." What? Like why? Like why is he even writing it? What does any of this even have to do with anything? I don't know. Maybe he'll tie it in at the end. That ability to create offices. Founders broke from this monarchical rule by giving the president some huge dick. Long-standing practice from the founding of today to today. The first Congress, for instance, routinely and explicitly created offices by statute. Still today, Congress creates the offices the executive branch may fill. For example, Congress has created several offices within the Department of Justice, including the offices of the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, Associate Attorney General, Solicitor General, and Assistant Attorneys General. For some agencies, Congress has also granted the agency head the power to appoint such officers and employees as are necessary to execute the functions vested in him. Past Congress has, at times, expressly created offices similar to the position now occupied by the special counsel. Congress created an office for a special counsel to investigate the Teapot Dome scandal and pursue prosecutions, and a statute provided for the appointment of an independent counsel that we addressed in Morrison v. Olson. That statute lapsed, and Congress has not since reauthorized the appointment of an independent counsel. We cannot ignore the importance the Constitution places on who creates a federal office. To guard against tyranny, the founders required that a federal office be established by law. As James Madison cautioned, if there is any point in which the separation of the legislative and executive powers ought to be maintained with great caution, it is that which relates to officers and offices. If Congress has not reached a consensus that a particular office should exist, the executive lacks the power to create and fill an office of his own accord. It is difficult to see how the special counsel has an office established by laws required by the Constitution. When the Attorney General appointed the special counsel, he did not identify any statute that clearly creates such an office. Nor did he rely on a statute granting him the authority to appoint officers as he deems fit, as the heads of some other agencies have. Instead, the Attorney General relied upon several statutes of a general nature. None of the statutes cited by the Attorney General appears to create an office for the special counsel. Is any of this relevant to anything? So this is page 58. Okay. Maybe I'll read this offline and see if I don't know why Thomas decided to write about this shit here. Okay. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll keep reading through all this because why the fuck else? What else are we gonna do? Do dailies. Bro, I need to... We'll do connections. Because why the fuck not? Create 4 groups of 4. I don't know why I read the instructions. Okay. Pyramid, Prince, British, Seal, Sting, Washington, Nova, Usher, Northwest, Racket, Lead, Eagle, Con, Direct, Hustle, and Guide. Okay. Black Entertainers. Prince, Seal, Usher, and... Is Sting a... Oh my god, I'm not even one off. Oh, fuck me. Oh, fuck. Never mind, forget all of that. Just kidding. I just assume that Seal is a black singer. I don't actually know. Okay, okay, well, I thought we could have an easy win there. Okay, hold on, we got this here. Okay, we can direct people, we can lead them, we can guide them, or we can usher them. Boom. Show the way. Okay. Okay, this is a hustle. It's a racket. It's a con. A sting by the police? A sting operation? What is sting? Types of... It's like types of, misleading people, I guess. Oh, wait, no. Pyramid scheme. Oh my god, fuck. Was it Sting? A sting, a racket, a hustle, a con, a pyramid. Ah, fuck! Oh my god, fuck me. Okay, Northwest, Nova, British Eagle, Washington Prince, Seal, and Pyramid. A seal, an eagle. What the fuck? The British. Nova, North. Oh, I have no fucking idea. Nova? Pyramid? Washington. Oh shit. Are these things like on a fucking dollar bill? Is there an eagle on our money? Like, isn't there like the pyramid? And then the U.S. seal? Maybe the pyramid. And what is DC on a bill somewhere? Northwest. British eagle? And then what are these? Prince, British, Nova, Northwest. So this is like some fucking... Oh my god, hold on. Are these Canadian territories? British Columbia, Nova Scotia, the Northwest Territories? What is Prince? Celia. Is Prince a territory? Oh my god, I bet it is. I don't know Canada. Fuck Canada. Oh, seen on the US dollar bill. Oh, it is. Fuck. What the fuck is this? Prince Edward Island? Oh my god, cringe. Alright, not bad. Okay. Tomorrow we will read the rest of this. Hopefully we'll go a bit faster. I love you guys. It's been fun. Be careful. Stay safe. Ripriano, cappuccino, pappuccino, cappuccino, 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 my deuterinos. I hope you all get a good grippuccino. True. Throw up a 950. I don't have it anymore. I can't throw up 950s like I used to be able to. I've gotten too old. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. Okay, okay. We take those. We take those. Okay. I'll be back tomorrow. Be careful. Don't die.